1989? What the fuck is this?
I was just reading
A shot to video how-to documentary source hosted by Linda Blair from 1989. It alternates between her and a small cast of revenge experts entailing different ways to take revenge on someone who has wronged you. These different acts are then reenacted in small vignettes. Such tactics as mailing offensive porn to the home address of someone who wronged you, to stuffing a potato up someone's tailpipe. It's all on the... Wait, what? That's murder, isn't it?
Friend, a person who makes...
What the fuck? It's all on the bizarre side, but quite funny and very left field, late 80s. Not porn of the condom generation, if you will.
a few pages from a fascinating book. It is literally filled with countless pieces of wisdom. One in particular deserves quoting. It reads, "Vengeance is mine." Now that's a powerful quote. And from what book am I reading? The Bible. That's right.
Fucking
the
own.
Bible. Now let me ask you a personal question. At some time in your life, has someone ever made you so angry, so upset, that you considered some form of retribution, some form of revenge? Of course you have. You wouldn't be human unless you did. Revenge is a natural emotion. The only problem is that we are all raised to consider revenge as being juvenile, immature. Society does not condone such lewd displays of conduct, at least not openly. And that is why we are here. Hi, I'm Linda Blair, welcoming you to How to Get Revenge. During this program, you are going to become quite literally an expert in the field of revenge. Now, when I talk about revenge, I'm not talking about bodily injury to anybody. I mean, that is definitely not our purpose here. Our aim is to simply inform you of the options you have to make that person experience the same humiliation, the same mental anguish that they inflicted on you. You are going to learn dozens of tricks of the trade from some of the top experts in the field, including private investigators, former police officers, and other virtuosos of vindication. You will also discover invaluable techniques of retribution, some simple, some more elaborate, but all designed to obtain the goals you desire.
How do you get a job to... What the fuck, bro? Yo, you should take revenge on your barber, dog. Like, honestly, if this is the haircut that you're rocking with, I don't trust that you're a revenge expert, okay? Because honestly, your barber is the one who did revenge on you, okay? What the fuck is this, dude? Unless he's a victim and he's out here being like, he's a victim and he's like, I need to take revenge on my barber. Please explain to me how I can do this, Linda.
And you will also see and hear fascinating stories from people just like you who were at one time victimized, yet came back to achieve the ultimate revenge. Let's face it, revenge can be sweet, especially when it's against someone who really deserves it. And I'm sure we all know a few of those, right? Former friends, lovers, business associates, family members. The list is virtually limitless. And you know what? We all practice revenge on a daily basis, and we don't even realize it.
I'm going to do it at normal speed. I don't like that it's fast.
Have you ever tried to change lanes on the freeway, but the idiot in the other lane won't let you?
Yeah, you! Woo! Come on! Yeah, you!
So what do you do to get even?
Kill
Well,
them.
when he tries to merge into your lane, you block him out. Now you've had your revenge.
What if he's not?
Ever since childhood, we've been practicing some form of revenge. Remember as a kid, ordering a pizza by telephone and having it delivered to another kid's house that you disliked? Sound familiar? Or maybe you remember this classic bit of adolescent revenge. The idea was to fill a paper bag with fresh animal droppings. The fresher, the better. Then place it on the victim's doorstep.
There is no way. Is this can't be serious. I don't think this is serious. What the fuck? Bro, this is crazy.
Once done, you'd light the bag on fire, knock on the victim's front door, then run to his backyard. Then when the victim arrived, usually the neighborhood grouch, he'd have no choice but to put out the fire. Meanwhile, you'd run to the victim's back door and begin pounding on it. This would cause the startled victim to run back through his home, soiling his fine shag carpeting with animal droppings while you've made your clean exit. Fasten your seatbelts, for now it's time for us to explore the more serious forms of revenge.
Why she say it
We've
like
assembled
that?
several of the top professionals in the field of revenge to guide us through this endeavor. First off, we're going to meet private investigator Mark Lewis. Mr. Lewis has aided hundreds of victims in getting even and is considered a master in automobile retribution. Next up is investigator Kyle Pappenfuss.
Bro, these guys have they're specialists. Like, he's got like, they have like specialties. Automobile retribution, what the fuck?
Give us pointers on how to cause havoc with a Mark's home. We'll also hear from a presently active police detective who we'll refer to as JM. He will enlighten us with his vast knowledge of seeking revenge by mail. And then there's Officer PF, another presently active police officer who will show us the many ways your telephone can cause tremendous damage to your enemy. But first, let's begin with private investigator Quinn Vickers. Mr. Vickers specializes in getting even with former friends and lovers. Mr. Vickers, could you give us an example of what could be done to a former friend or lover?
Few examples, huh? Okay, let's talk about friends. I had this client whose best friend came to him and talked him into investing in a real estate scam. $10,000 talking. He promised my client that he'd get a 75% return on his money within 3 months. And being that they were good friends, well, my client didn't think that his friend would screw him. Well, he sure did. And the worst thing that happened was that when he found out that his so-called friend had made approximately $3,500 on the deal, and that's when my client first came to me.
What did you have him immediately do?
Immediately, nothing. Not a damn thing. You see, the secret with revenge is patience. Patience. If he were to act right away, his so-called friend would have caught on, and he would have called the authorities or done something in return to my client. And that would have meant he won again, and my client loses again. So you wait. In this case, I waited a couple of months. Then I hit him on several levels. First of all, I took a death certificate, whited out the former information, filled in his name there, and along with a letter stating that I was his wife, I sent the death certificate and the letter off to the Bureau of Internal Revenue and the Social Security Office. Next year comes tax time, he's screwed with the Internal Revenue. Down the road a ways, when he wants to change jobs, he's screwed again. And way down the road, when he finally wants to collect, no Social Security benefits.
Hit him in the pocketbook, eh?
Better yet, hit him while he's down.
Yeah, man, just do fraud, which is like very illegal. That's cool. Yeah, just do something that will definitely put you in a federal prison.
After all, my client wasn't the heavy here. He was just trying to even up the score. Next, I made appointments for this punk with several professionals, doctors, lawyers, dentists, you name it. And I'm talking dozens here. So when he doesn't show up, he's got a lot of pissed off professionals. Not only that, several of them, as you may well know, will bill him for not showing up.
Ouch. I'd sure hate to be him.
Yeah, so would I. But remember what the Bible says, an eye for an eye. Remember, this guy did my client in. Okay, then I finally topped off the whole escapade by severing his marriage. This took a little work, but it was worth it.
There's more to the eye for an eye, man.
For several evenings, I waited outside of his home and watched to see if he'd leave home at night and at what time. Eventually he did, and I noted on what day and what time. I then waited until he returned and made note of that time. Once I had proof of one of his evening treks away from home, I purchased an inexpensive woman's shoe from a local store. I then wrapped it in a small box. Then, using the letterhead of a local hotel, which is free, available in most hotel lobbies or rooms, I typed a letter saying the following: Dear Mr. and Mrs., and I put their last name in there. When the two of you were here on the evening of, and I put the date the man left home, your wife forgot her shoe. Here it is. We'd appreciate the return of $2.50 for postage. Thank you, the management of, and I typed in the hotel's name. Anyhow, to make a long story short, the upshot and the downshot is that his wife finally files for divorce. He has to sell the home, the cars, the stocks, everything. I guess you could say my client finally came out on top.
Boy, I'd have to agree.
What
Imagine
the
that,
fuck?
breaking up a marriage to the U.S.
Okay, that part is at least not illegal. I mean, it's really fucked up, and it probably should be, but not illegal.
Amazing. But what's even more amazing is the many other ways that you can use the post office in a vengeful manner. And to give us a few examples is Detective J.M. Detective, could you give us some examples of revenge by mail?
Revenge by mail is only limited by the person's imagination. For the most part, the examples I'm about to give are ones I've learned while on the
Or morality.
job, although I must admit a couple of them are my own creations. But let's get to it. One of my favorite pranks is very simple, but very effective. It can be a real pain in the...
One of my clients, Theodore Kaczynski, was fucked over by Harvard University. So we got together and figured out the most effective prank.
But what you do is go down to your local post office, get a change of address form, fill in the victim's name and address, and the new address. It can be anywhere your heart desires, from around the block to around the world. And if he also receives gifts or valuable items in the mail, I suggest making the local Salvation Army as the new address, or any other place which might benefit from such items. Another way to create havoc and also make your victims shell out money is to look through magazines and catalogs. There are a lot of expensive items in there that can be bought now and paid for later. So order as many expensive items as you can and mail it to your victim's address. Another thing to do is to join these Book of the Month clubs, Record of the Month clubs, or whatever of the month clubs. Ever try to get off one of those lists? Can you imagine being in 10 of those lists?
I'd like to play a little game with you, if that's all right. I'll give you a situation, and then I'd like you to respond with a method of mail revenge that you would recommend.
Okay, shoot.
Let's say the Mark is a family man. You know, a wife, 2 kids, a dog. What can you do to disrupt the entire family as opposed to just the Mark?
Put them on offensive mailing lists. Pornographic mailing lists such as pornographic magazines, pornographic merchandise. Put them on the Communist Party's mailing list. There are hundreds of...
Yo, he said porn and communism. You know, the two most offensive things I can think of at this very moment for a family man. Porn and like the PSL's newsletter. Yeah, subscribe them to twitch.tv/hasanAbi.
mailing lists you can put them on. What husband wants his kids looking at this stuff? And, for that matter, what husband wants his wife thinking that he subscribes to these lists? Another thing you can do is send your Mark's wife a pretty box of chocolates. And a note saying how much he loves her and all like that. It's one of my favorites.
I'm confused. How can sending a box of chocolates and a nice note to the Mark's wife get him in trouble?
Did I forget to mention mixing chocolate laxatives in with the candy?
I guess
What?
you did.
Yo, he said poison your Mark's wife. Poison them. That's crazy. That's cool. He's just, maybe he did work with the Unabomber.
Good. Well, that ought to flesh out the situation. Okay. How about if your Mark is a businessman?
Send the sexually perverted magazines right to his office. Can you imagine the looks he'll get when he gets his stuff right on the job? These bizarre toys and sexually perverted magazines? Should be quite a thrill. By the way, there are dozens upon dozens of homosexual and bisexual magazines available today. I found if you mail these to the Mark's place of work, you can start rumors or quickly get them fired. And if you can get a photo of the Mark, it's even better. Send that to a gay magazine along with the requisite money and place an ad for a gay lover. Then when the copy comes out with his picture and the ad in it, send that to his boss, his wife, or his girlfriend.
Damn, they had bi visibility even in the 80s, dog. That's crazy. Now bisexuals are demanding bi invisibility. Fucked up.
Fascinating. Well, how about if you have a bone to pick with your neighbor?
Try this. Get some printed invitations made up, announcing a Sunday afternoon brunch to your neighbors, announcing the date, the time, the directions, the whole enchilada. The fancier the invitation, the better. Mail it to his people at work, all the neighbors. Then sit back and watch the hassles begin.
Not that I want to know, but how can you ruin someone's marriage or love relationship?
Here's what I learned years ago. If the Mark is a man, just type a letter up saying, "Dear Deborah, my name is," and put the Mark's name there. "I saw your ad in Swingers Bazaar this last week, and I'm hot to trot. I'm anxious to get it on. But you can't reach me by phone because I'm married. But you can reach me at the address on the envelope, but mark it personal so my wife doesn't see it. Put that letter in an envelope marked Deborah Lawson, care of Bazaar Swingers ad, box 1268A, Charleville, Arizona." Of course, there is no such address, so the post office will return to the Mark's home. And sooner or later, the Mark's girlfriend or wife is bound to discover it. And then the fireworks begin.
What else can you send in the mail that will irritate your victim?
Things that smell. I mean, things that really stink. I mean, animal droppings, human droppings, overripened fruit and vegetables, fish. Imagine what a week-old fish smells like. It smells like Boston in the summertime.
Well, Detective, thank you very much for your suggestions.
Now, you're welcome. Oh, by the way, when do I get paid for this?
Ah, don't worry. The check's in the mail. Now let's rejoin investigator Quinn Vickers, who has a visitor.
I wouldn't be so cocky if I were you. You're about to be signed up to some communist magazines. You know what I mean?
With an interesting story that many of us can relate to.
You know, it's a common fact of life that there are those people out there, a small number, but nonetheless they're out there, those who feel that they have to stress their superiority over others. Some do it at their work with fellow workers, some do it at sports, on the athletic fields, some do it in their love life. Yet there are just a few who feel a great need to stress their superiority over decent, honest, basic human beings, such as my client, Mr. Harold Jerriman over here. Harold, why don't you pick it up from here?
Well, the incident took place on Thursday afternoon during my lunch break. I was eating at the little diner across the street from the library where I work. Everything was perfectly normal. It was then that I first noticed him. At first, I didn't pay much attention to him, being more interested in my meal. However, it soon became evident that he was a troublemaker.
Hey, I see a good place to sit. Come on. Yo, buddy, mind if we eat here?
Well, actually, yes, but there are other tables available.
I know that, Wimp, but I want to eat at this one because I want to watch my truck, you understand?
If you give me a moment, I'm just about finished.
Oh, just about finished, huh? Well, I can't wait. Besides, it looks to me like your order's to go.
Ah!
I was terrified. I had no choice but to leave. As I was leaving, I noticed the man's license plate number and made a mental note of it.
Why did he just sit down in the noodles, dude? He just straight plopped into the noodles, man.
I was so humiliated. This kind of thing happened to me many times in the past, and I wanted to get even with that man. I looked upon him as being all the people who have hurt me rolled into one, and that's when I contacted Mr. Vickers.
Well, when Harold first came to me, he didn't know what to do. All he had was the punk's license number, but that was enough for me. I went down to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and I filled out a form stating that, I had a small accident with this guy, and I was just checking to verify his address. Within a couple of days, I had the punk's address. Now, Harold here was adamant about getting even with him himself, so we laid out a battle plan. Harold, you take over, buddy.
With pleasure. Once I had the man's name and address, I decided to start off with what the man apparently wanted: food. So from a payphone across the street from the man's apartment, I called about 15 takeout restaurants and had them send him all types of food. And I had them spaced out so that they would arrive about every 15 minutes. Let me back up a moment to tell you that there had been a series of robberies at a local convenience store chain. Now, with that in mind, I planted a toy handgun under the truck's seat, and I threw in a city map with the locations of the convenience stores circled in red and a few newspaper clippings about the robberies. Then I went to a telephone and phoned the police and stated anonymously that I had seen where the robber lived and that I had seen his gun in his truck. To make a long story short, the police arrived just as the man was getting into his truck. When the police saw the gun, the map, and the newspaper clippings, well, let's just say that the man had a lot of explaining to do down at the station.
How do you feel now?
Confident. Of course I don't go causing trouble for other people, but at least I know I have the confidence in myself to know I can get even.
Bro, dudes who look and sound like this still do this, by the way. I'm just saying.
With anyone.
Confidence, a quality we all desire, yet surprisingly few of us possess. However, most of us do possess one of these, a telephone. And it so happens that this is the revenge seeker's greatest ally. And here to enlighten us on this subject is Officer P.F., whose looks we have electronically altered to protect his identity.
I'm going to be demonstrating several methods of phone reprisal using my own personal phone. Now, some of the techniques that I'm going to talk about can be done in your home, but some of them are going to require the use of a payphone, and I'll explain that as we go along. Now, first of all, if the prank you're going to pull requires you to talk to the mark yourself on the phone and the mark recognizes your voice, then I suggest that you use a handkerchief placed over the mouthpiece of the phone. Now, I know that you've seen this in millions of movies and TV shows, but the fact remains that it works. Now, before we get even with that certain low life in your life, let me just ask you a little question. What is the most valuable possession that a human being has?
Revenge.
You give up? The answer is time. Time is precious. Don't you just hate it when somebody wastes your time? And time is money, too. So, when you get a mark to waste his time, you're getting him in more ways than just one. Now, I've found this particular routine to be very effective when the mark is married or living with their lover. Now, if the mark is a man, you get a close female friend of yours, like my friend Monica here, to help you out. Now, if the mark is a woman, obviously you're going to do just the opposite. Now, let's assume that the mark's name is Bill. Now, when Bill leaves home, you get your female friend to call up his home phone number, and when his mate answers, you get her to say,
it's a good thing that she's not blurred. Because there's no other, can't look her up.
Something like this.
Oh, hi. Is Bill, never mind.
Then you have her hang up the phone. Now, this will definitely sow seeds of suspicion into Bill's relationship. And if you follow up with a late-night phone call, hanging up without speaking when the mate answers the phone, well, then you'll really foul things up a lot. If your mark happens to be in a business where he meets customers in various locations, then don't disappoint him. Using a fictitious name, set up meetings at various locations around the city, in restaurants and bars and hotels. And then by the time he's traveled around town and he realizes that he's been burned, he's wasted lots of time and money. Monica, why don't you tell everyone what happened to you recently and exactly what you did about it?
Okay. I was working as a temp in this office, and I was only supposed to be there for a couple of days. And immediately I had trouble with this nasty tramp of a secretary who had been with the company for 20 years. Well, she told me I wasn't even competent enough to make coffee, and she complained about everything I did. Well, after 2 days of this, I had had it with her. So I phoned her boss. And when he answered the phone, I told him I was with a rival company and that his secretary recently applied for work with us. And then I continued on and asked him questions about his secretary, if she was good, had good work habits, etc. Anyway, to make a long story short, the boss, feeling betrayed, fired the woman. And guess who took her place?
Don't you just love happy endings? Now, a while ago, I mentioned that sometimes you need to use a payphone. Now, there can be several reasons for this. For instance, say that you placed a revengeful ad in the newspaper. Most newspapers will require you to leave a phone number so they can call back and verify that you're not just a crank caller. In much the same way that a restaurant that makes deliveries will require you to leave a home phone number so they can check and make sure that the order is legitimate. Now, one thing that you must never, I repeat, never, ever do is leave your actual home phone number, because this could lead to a lot of trouble. Now, here is one where you will definitely need to use a payphone. Call your Mark's spouse or lover and tell them that you are the spouse of one of your Mark's co-workers, and say that you have proof that your mates are having an affair. Tell them that you hired a private eye who has shown you photos that made you cry. And if the mate doesn't believe you, you say,
"Well, if you don't believe me, here's my home number. Give me a call."
Then give her the payphone's number and hang up. And when they call back, add a few more sordid details about the affair. Oh, and an emotional quiver in your voice when you do this will just add to the realism. Now, let's toss it back to our host in the studio, who will give you a rundown of my 5 favorite phone gags.
Number 1, call plenty of salesmen for an in-home sales pitch or demonstration. Number 2, start or cancel services to Mark's home, such as the gardener, pool man, cable TV service, etc. Number 3, order food from restaurants that deliver and send to Mark's home. Number 4, if you know any of your Mark's reservations in advance, call to cancel them. And number 5, call charitable organizations and donate goods in the Mark's name. This will cause much embarrassment when they arrive at the Mark's home. Interesting thoughts, to say the least. Now let's rejoin investigator Quinn Vickers, who is joined by a young lady with a fascinating story.
Wherever there's love and romance, there's also pain and deceit. Approximately 75% of my clients come to me with problems in their love life. Belinda here was one of them. Belinda, why don't you tell them about it?
Well, a couple of years ago, I was going to college to become a nurse. And
Surviving
I did
edged
not
weapons?
think myself as very attractive, was not very popular. And I met this guy at a pep rally. His name was Frank. And we went out, had a good time, and he asked me to go to a game. And later found out that he was the head cheese on the football team, as they put it. So anyways, we went out, we had a good time, had a great time.
Okay, you made a TOS friendly version, but like I feel like it's fake gore. It's not real gore. So why is there actually TOS in it?
Were you happy together?
Yeah, we were very happy together. In fact, we were so happy, I was hoping that he was going to ask me to marry him.
There's real gore?
And then Victoria came along.
Oh.
Let me explain that Victoria was a very popular, attractive girl. She was also the head cheerleader.
I guess she just became attracted to Frank. She started hanging around with us a lot, and I really didn't know what was going on. And she became quite flirtatious. And then I got really hurt. I found out that she was sleeping with Frank. And then I got angry. Really angry. And that's when I called Mr. Vickers.
I make it a point never to get personally involved with my clients, but, well, Belinda here reminded me so much of my daughter that I just had to get involved.
What?
Belinda told me she didn't want to hurt Frank. She felt he was just being victimized by Victoria. So we planned our attack directly at Victoria. The revenge was aimed at her. First thing we found out was that Victoria had dated several guys around campus. An awful lot of them were on the athletic teams on the university. So then I had Belinda set up an appointment at the free clinic for an examination.
Well, this was great because not only did I get a free pelvic, but I also got a free examination. And while I was there, I got a letterhead from the free clinic, at which point I brought it back to Mr. Vickers and he told me what to do.
I had Belinda find out the names of the various athletes on the, well, as a matter of fact, all the athletes on all the sports teams around the university. Then on free clinic stationery, I had her write a letter to each of them. The letter stated that Victoria had been to the free clinic and had tested positive for syphilis, and that each of them were sexual partners in this little peccadillo.
So on Friday, I sent all of the letters to the athletic department at the college, and
I'm pretty sure that's illegal, I think. Like, what was going on in the 80s, man? It was just like crime was legal. Like, people talk about how fucking crime is legal in California or whatever, but like it turns out in the 80s it was actually in the 80s it was truly legal. Like, they were just like, you could just do whatever you wanted.
on Monday, well, whoa.
It's fake. You got to tell Chad this is satire and these are all actors. Well, that ruins everything for me. I mean, yes. I don't think there are real cops with the wife. with the wife of the cop not having her face blurred. And the cop himself having his face blurred.
Ooh. Needless to say, the athletic department would have nothing to do with Victoria. None of the students would have nothing to do with Victoria. No one would touch her. No one would talk to her. She was treated like she had the plague, which pleased me to no end.
So tell them what ultimately happened.
Well, after 2 weeks of humiliation, she transferred to another junior college and again became the head cheerleader. And she had her jollies for a while until I again sent the same humiliating letter to the athletic department, at which point there was no more Victoria, and I have no one but Mr. Vickers to thank.
Well, stories like that certainly make my day.
Okay, what?
As to the
He says she reminds me of my daughter, who I would want to fuck.
talents of our next guest. His name is Mark Lewis. His occupation, private detective. His specialty, car revenge.
Now, probably a...
Okay, I love the concept of revenge being segmented out piece by piece with like car revenge having its own segment is really funny. Where like on the one hand they're like, this is phone revenge, and now we move on to car revenge, which is the revenge of the car variety, like what the IRA used to do.
Simplest way to aggravate your Mark is to tamper with his tires. And the simplest thing to do here would be to unscrew the valve cap and let the air out. Now, the best thing to do would be all 4 tires. But if you don't have enough time, make sure you do the front tires. That way it's hard to steer and your Mark can't drive off that easily.
Now, a lot of people recommend putting glass or nails under the tires. But believe me, for the best results, let the air out yourself.
Now, one thing that every car needs is gas, and this car is no exception. Now, if the situation warrants it, and you need to damage the engine, the best way of doing that is adding some things to the fuel, like
sugar,
baking flour, sugar, regular granulated sugar, or glue, epoxy. Now, this will certainly damage the engine, cost a lot of money, cost your mark a lot of time, and it will certainly drive your mark crazy. My clients are always asking me for an easy, efficient way of providing their marks with a massive headache. Well, I have just the thing. A locking gas cap. Now, you can buy this gas cap in any auto parts store, a couple of dollars. What you do here is remove the unlocking gas cap and replace it with the locking gas cap. You just screw it on here, turn it, take the key. That's the important thing here. You have to take the key. Then when your mark